So let's do part 2 of this, which is now we're going to code the save entries function in the module for storage and a unique ID function. So I've already copied in these 3 lines into my storage .js. Okay. So in this case, this is where we'll now code this function that will come back in a minute and actually include it in our handle form submission. Okay, so like everything that we've done, well, not everything, but in this case, when we want to expose functions, right? So we're going to say const save entries. Okay, this will equal a function. We are going to end up passing something to it because what does it need? It needs a reference to, right? It needs a reference to the entries, right? So here we have the carbon footprint entries because we've pushed each submission in there. So now what we're going to do inside of here, and we'll put that argument in a minute, or sorry, that parameter in a minute. What we're going to do here is what we talked about above, which we're going to say local storage dot set item. We'll set the key that we've been given. In this case, JSON. And hopefully now, based on the last one, you have some context for what stringify is doing. It's stringifying. It's actually making it, if I wasn't clear about this, it's making it into a JSON compatible or a JSON standard object with basically strings around everything. So we're going to end up calling this entries. Okay, so we're going to stringify the entries, and then we're going to reference that local key, and we're going to set that item. So that means this is going to need entries. Okay, now this is the variable that we've declared inside of this block, inside of this module. But of course, when we write it, we'll give it the carbon footprint entries. Okay, so that's the thing we need to do here, and then we'll just console log so that we know something happened. Okay, data saved to local storage successfully. Now, why are we needing to say it was done successfully? Because in this instance, don't talk and type, Rio, doesn't work. In this instance, a couple of things could happen, okay? And this is why we'll revisit this code in a minute, because as you've already seen in several of the things that we've done, we have to account for that, you know, what may not be the intended outcome of our code, and that we have to handle that in a way that allows our code to fail gracefully, I would say. And this is definitely one of those things, and you will start to see this more as you see how we're going to implement and use these entries that we're placing in local storage to give them persistence. Okay, but for now, let's actually do now the matter of fact, let me make sure because I had stepped this out. Okay, so also remember, and this is just a review here of this, which is we can only store strings, so we're converting our JavaScript array of objects. Remember, that's what is in our carbon footprint entries, right? So in this case, into a JSON object, okay? Good. Into a JSON string using JSON stringify before we save it. Okay, so we have to, so this runs, okay, and then this sets the item with that key. Okay, so now let's do the associated other part of this, okay, which is now that we have the, now that we have imported the module, we haven't used it yet. We now have our new entry, okay, and we've pushed our item into there. I think I do have some, yeah. So in our app.js, let's include some context that shows what we're about to do. Okay, so we're about to save the entire footprint entries into that storage. So we would say storage dot save entries, referencing the save entries method on the module. And now what are we going to pass to it is carbon footprint entries. Okay. All right, so this is only going to happen on submit because it's in the submit handler. Good, good. Now, before we actually test this, something I was playing around before I thought might make this part of what we're doing a little easier. Let's see, our code's all there. Good. And we'll submit in a minute. I didn't realize I can actually grab this and pull it over because for now, here's the majority of what we're using, so you don't have to go all the way over. I don't know if it'll stay permanently. I think it might. We'll see. So it's just another thing to make our lives a little easier. So in local storage right now, for me, there's nothing. And if you do have anything, go ahead and clear that before we now test to see if when we submit, okay, and you can, in this case, see what's happening already. Okay, so I like to give some data. Okay, let's submit the form. Good. So now we can see, and by the way, this is important to understand based on the last time we talked about this, is that anytime we set the item, it's just going to overwrite what was already in there, right? So it just does a full override of what was already in there. That's why the first time we saw 1, the second time we saw 2, and down here we have that, okay? Okay, so now that we've done this part, okay, we're not going to do yet the get item, okay, because we're going to do that in a different function. But what we do need to think about now is back, we've already done this in the app.js, so now back in the storage.js. This is what I was hinting at before. We're going to do something, let's do it here, okay. So remember what I was saying is that when we do things, we need to make sure have a default case or an edge case that we account for. And in this case, there's a variety of things that could happen when we try to save our data structure, and by the way, very common data structure in an array of objects into local storage. So what we want to do, and this is a very common thing in programming that you will see, okay? This is not unique to JavaScript. When you try something, this is a try-catch block. That's what this is referred to. We're going to try something, and we're going to catch something, okay? So basically, it's like, try this, and it's kind of like the flow of an if-else block. So it's like, you know, instead of if conditional, it just says try. So it's basically going to say, and in this case, we're going to try this, okay? So we're going to try to save to local storage. And if there's an error, because there may be, right? And in this case, you're going to see something new called console.error. Console error, in this case, we'd say error saving data to local storage. Now, let's go ahead and make this a template string. That way we can actually see the error. But we haven't talked about where we get this error yet, so we'll handle that in a minute. So what happens here is because your browser is, this is your API. So we're calling an API for the browser. And in this case, like before on like the init, where we then have an event that is fired because the browser handled it, we didn't actually have to, when we called the init, pass at the event because the browser handled that. Somewhat true here. So what happens here is if there is an error, right, it does pass it. Now we could have called this anything. We could have called this error. Might have been more clear, and let's go ahead and do that. So over here what we can say is we can say, hey, if there's an error, then go ahead and show us what that error is. Okay. Now, probably we won't see an error. Okay, and we could talk about how you would generate an error. But you just need to handle it. And this is definitely what you do in coding is you do something and then you make sure you've accounted for a possible error and handled it as well as you can. Okay. All right, so now we have a good solid try-catch block. I'm going to have you do some prompting to learn more about the try-catch block. In some senses, you could almost say anything we do, and when we write code, we could put in a try-catch block because something could happen, but definitely in this instance, we'd want to implement that. Okay? Okay, so let's actually go over here, and we already seen it, but, you know, just to look at, okay, here, yep, we have some if we do it again. Okay, now we have some more data. Good, we have some more data. Cool, right? So then if we hit here, right, and we hit refresh here, good. Right, so we know it's working without issue. We haven't actually defined the error, and we could probably talk about how. If I remember right, there is ways to change this to create it, but honestly, more than anything, your code just needs to handle that. Okay, so there's another thing we need to do here. So now that we've saved this, the thing we need to think about, and I kind of hinted to some of this before when we did a timestamp. And there's a uniqueness, of course, to timestamps because it happens, you know, it gives you that string. And again, this gives you an object, this gives you a string. And we're going to use this if we need day and time functionality because it's a, you know, a kind of a human readable, right? So in this case, if we were to drop down, we can see this. Oh, we can clearly read that as the date. In this case, maybe not clearly, but it is the date and time very precisely. But for our particular application, we're setting ourselves up for the update function and the CRUD operations. And what we need is we need a unique, in this case, we need a unique way to identify some of our content specifically. So we're going to write another function. We're going to say export const, in this case, generate unique ID. Okay. Equal to function. Okay. Now in here, oh yeah, I already handled that. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. I noticed that I'm missing some. There we go. Okay. So in this case, we're going to do something fairly straightforward, in a sense that we're just doing a return. And instead of calling what we did over here, which is new date, in this case we're going to call date now, which is something similar except it doesn't return the same type of data structure. But in this case we're going to call toString on it. Now you're going to see the output of what this will create in a minute. But basically this returns in milliseconds, okay? Where we saw that this returned an actual date. We're going to see a actual millisecond since January 1st, 1970. There's a whole story around that date, but that's from where we count and get milliseconds, which is great because that is a uniquely ID and machine readable number that we can then use, and then we'll convert it to a string. Okay, so when we want to use this now, matter of fact, I think I have a little content. Yeah, okay. So now let's actually put a little content here to help understand. So this generates a simple, unique entry for each ID based on the current timestamp. So in this case, not the one we've coded already, but the date now. Okay. Okay. Good. And because we're using the return here, right, so we're returning a unique, good, okay, so now we're returning this. So where is this going to be? So in here, so in this function, we are going to now add a new key value. Okay, it doesn't matter where we add it because as you saw when it actually saves it and displays it back to us, it's in a different order. But in this case, we'll just say ID is storage dot create unique ID. Oh, not semicolon. And comma, because remember each of these, right? Yeah, so that's good. This is about just learning and remembering. And what I love about the editor is it just tells you, oh, hey, that was wrong, and that's what the red tells you. So let's come back over here now. So now what we could do is just create another one. Okay, let's actually create. There we go. And what we could see here is on the new one now, we have this unique identifier. Okay. And we didn't on the other one because, oh yeah, we do have that as well. Actually, I must have cleared it somehow between those. But I'm going to clear it one more time. I'm going to submit. Okay. Oh, good. And what this really shows us is because I cleared it, I cleared local storage, but in memory was still those entries. So when it went to save, it saved everything in there. And that's kind of what I was trying to show you, is the idea that by saving this to storage here, not only do we get the persistence, which is great, but also anytime it sets that item, it'll take whatever amount of objects in that array that we have. Okay, so for this one, I want you to research, using, so we did that. So explain try catch block, explain what it is more, learn more about it, and how does new date to ISO string differ from this. So this is good just to understand the way these two things work. And so we'll go ahead and do your workflow with this one, and then we'll go on to our last one. We're almost done with 5.